Hi, everyone, and welcome to our special edition Care Connection. I'm really excited to have with us here today Lauren Kirchmyer and Tamar Tait. We're going to be talking about how to avoid elder fraud scams that have been upcoming. This is the second in our series that we have started off since last time with Bethann Nelson, so I'm excited to have this one get going today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren to start us off with her PowerPoint presentation along with Tamar.
All right, thank you so much again for having us today. As mentioned previously, my name is Lauren Kirchmyer. I'm the Marketing and Outreach Coordinator at Better Business Bureau of Upstate New York. Our office is located in Irs, New York, which is a suburb of Buffalo, and we serve the 48 counties of upstate New York, which is everything you see in blue. There's a second office in New York State, which is what you see in gray, but I know that there's people on this call who are from other parts of our wonderful country, and there are other BBBs all throughout the United States. So if you go to bbb.org, you can find the office that's closest to you, or feel free to ask me and I'd be happy to send you their phone number as well. What we've noticed is scammers are using the pandemic to create urgency and put new twists on old scams. And how do I know this? If you go to bbb.org/scam tracker, we have a crowdsourced website, which means that all of the information that is shared on this page comes from consumers just like you. It's searchable, which means you can zoom in and out on the map. You can look up keywords, a specific scam type, and you can also look based on the date of when that scam was reported. So I have a map of New York State because, like I said, that's where we are located. And whether you are a victim or not, we encourage you to still take the time and report your scam, because this information, whether you lose your money or your personal information or not, having that information shared will hopefully prevent someone else from falling for that scam in the future. If you look at the top of the map, it says report a scam in a red box. So if you click on that box, it'll let you report a scam. Actually, let me go back to searching for scams. My apologies on that. So if you were to search a scam on our scam tracker page, this one I did Medicare scams, and I did it within a specific time frame. And this is what would pop up when you search for that specific keyword. On the right, you'll see it says view under details. So if you were to click on view, it'll give you a much more thorough explanation of that scam itself. So you can learn who was scammed, how they were scammed, how much money they lost. Where it says scam description, it tells you all about what happened to that individual. And at the very bottom, it says learn more about healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare scams. And if you click on learn more, it'll take you to articles that are based on that scam itself. So as I mentioned, that was a Medicare related scam. So now this is going to talk to you about healthcare scams and provide you with information about how those different scams work and how to hopefully catch the red flags to prevent yourself from falling for them. If you go to bbb.org, you can also search our news area on our website. So if you just scroll down to featured news, and you can search those articles as well. So if you go to search all news, you can see I typed in senior citizen on the side. I clicked enter, and these are the articles that popped up, all relating to senior citizens. Going back to that red button that I mentioned earlier where it said report a scam, it's a really quick and easy process for you if you are interested in sharing any scams with us. And as I said, we have BBBs all throughout the United States. We also have some in Canada and Mexico. So no matter where you are in our country, you are able to share that information with us and let others know about the scam. So first, we just ask for information about the scammer themselves, if they used a specific business name or they gave you an address, a phone number, if they had a website or an email address. Then we ask you about the scam itself. How did they contact you? Did they contact you as an individual or as a business? Then we ask what type of scam it was, so that would be that Medicare scam that I mentioned earlier. Then we ask you for the details about your scam. If you have any images you want to share with us, such as if you took a screenshot of your email or a text message, or if you took a picture of something you received in the mail. We ask if you lost any personal information, if you lost any money, and then we ask for just some statistics about yourself. For all of this, it's pretty much what you're willing to share with us and how much you are able to share with us. The reason we ask for things such as your age, your gender, if you're part of active duty military, veteran, spouse, student, all of that information there is so that we can see if there's a specific grouping who is being targeted by these scams. And I'll get into that in a little bit further. And then you just share your contact information that is only given to us. We do not post that because if we were to post your personal information, then it will possibly have you fall for more scams in the future or be targeted for scams in the future because they have your phone number and email. So we keep that protected just on our end. So if we have any questions, we can contact you and then you can report that scam. What I do is I take all the information that's reported to Scam Tracker and I create monthly social media scam updates to let people know when they're browsing online, these are the things that are being reported to us, especially at this specific point in time. Your reports also help us with annual scam reports. So we noticed during the pandemic, there were a lot of online purchase scams that were happening. You can learn more about these at bbb.org/online purchase scams. And online purchase scams are also among the top 3 riskiest scams in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So they're not new. We just saw them really jump up quite a bit throughout the pandemic. For those who lost money to online purchase scams, they said low price was their top reason that they purchased a product online and lost money. So we remind you that just because something is a low price and you think that you're getting a great deal doesn't really mean that that's the case. Sometimes low price is just that little way of a scammer trying to trick you into giving them your personal information and your credit card information. So take extra precautions when you're shopping online. And also pay attention to what products are popular at that point in time. Are you going to be looking up masks? For example, that was a huge one at the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone was looking for masks to help protect themselves and help keep them safe if they were out in public. And they went online to try and purchase these because the stores were running out. And unfortunately, a lot of scammers took that to mind. They were advertising masks on their website and never ended up delivering that product to that consumer. So pay attention to what products are popular and make sure that you're going through a reputable business and a reputable seller before you make your purchase. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit to our actual risk report. So as I mentioned before, I apologize, my dog just got up from a nap and he just was walking around. So if you hear some noise, it's just him moving. But what we do with our Scam Tracker reports all throughout BBB as a system, so not just for Upstate New York, we look at the scams all across all of our BBBs, so throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and we create this risk report, which you can access on bbb.org/risk report. And this isn't just the top scams that are happening. We figure out what you're most at risk for based on your exposure, your susceptibility, and the average amount of monetary loss. So that all multiplied together calculates your specific risk. In 2020 alone, there were over 46,000 scams reported. There was a median loss of $115, and 46.7% of all of our scams report included financial losses. Other than losing money to a scam, people also felt that they lost time, they lost confidence and peace of mind, and then they also lost personal information. So it's not just money that you could potentially lose. There's a lot of other factors that take place. In 2020, the top riskiest scams across the board were online purchase, as I already mentioned, followed by employment, fake check and money order, advanced fee loans, home improvement, romance, cryptocurrency, tech support, travel, vacation, timeshare, and investment. We also break everything down by your specific age grouping. So in the 65 and older age category, you can see that that age group is less susceptible compared to other groups. And they're a little bit less exposed to scams. However, the 65 and over age group was losing the most amount of money in terms of median dollar amount loss. For the first time ever since we started this report too, the 18 to 24-year-old age group was losing more money in that median dollar amount loss as well. So in the past, we saw 65 and older losing the most money across the board. And this year that changed slightly, being tied with that 18 to 24-year-old age group. So that was some really interesting information. We also break down then based on your age range what you are most at risk for because of your age. So again, looking at that age 65 and up bracket, those individuals are more at risk for falling for travel, vacation, timeshare scams, online purchase scams, and romance scams. And Tamar will be going into more of those scams during her presentation and the actual details about them. When it comes to men versus women, because as I mentioned before, we also ask for your gender when you're reporting a scam, and this is why. Women lost the least amount of money when compared to men. They had an average median dollar amount loss at $105 versus $168 compared to men. However, women were more susceptible and more exposed to scams in comparison to men. On the bottom, you can see what the top 3 scams are as well based on your gender. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. For those who did lose money, they said that the way that they were contacted by these scams were mostly through a website, followed by social media, for example, using Facebook to make a purchase, then email and phone. So we noticed that scams initiated through a website and social media were more likely to result in a loss than scams initiated over the phone, even for adults ages 65 and over. So in the past, usually that older age group was getting the phone scams or the door-to-door scams, but now we're seeing that more of those are also happening online. Those who lost money also said that they lost it through a credit card, online payment systems such as PayPal, and bank account debit. So if you're utilizing any of these forms of payment, especially online, pay attention to who is collecting that information, what they're doing with that information, and make sure that it is through a secured website. We also asked if you are part of the military. So this is the reason why. As you can see, those who were part of the military in 2020 lost more money on average to scams at $140 compared to non-military, which was only $112. They're also a little bit more susceptible for falling for a scam. If you break down that military even a little bit more, active duty military lost a large number in comparison to those who are non-military. So active duty military lost on average $269 to a scam, and they were a lot more susceptible. If you are a veteran, please pay attention to the advertisements that are being shared with you because you are most exposed to scams at 68.4%. So again, if you are part of the military, please just take a little bit of extra caution, especially if it's a military targeted ad. If they're saying that they have military discounts or veteran discounts, make sure that they are truly a reputable organization and that they are giving you that support properly. And this is the breakdown if you are interested in the riskiest scams based on if you're a military spouse, if you're a veteran, or if you are a non-military member. We remind you too that it's not just the people that they're targeting, it's the way that they are targeting individuals with scams. Unfortunately, scammers are using legitimate organizations and brands and they're impersonating them. So we saw in 2020, these were the top 10 organizations and brands that were being impersonated to try and trick people. Number 1 was Social Security, 2 was Amazon, 3 Publishers Clearinghouse, 4 Apple, 5 Microsoft, 6 PayPal, 7 was Medicare, 8 was Walmart, 9 was Dominion Energy, and 10 was Cash Advance America. With these, we remind you to just really look over, especially if it's an email or a website that you're utilizing, look to see if there's any spelling or grammar errors. See if the punctuation may seem a little weird or the email reads a little funny. If you do see all these issues, that's a huge red flag that it's an impersonated business. What I like to say for Amazon, for example, is compare it to another Amazon bill that you may have received and see if there's any huge factors that look a little bit different. And if it does look different, it's most likely a scam that was delivered to you. If it's someone that's calling you, you can always hang up on that phone call, call the actual phone number for that customer service line, not the number that they called you by. So for example, if you go to Medicare's website, look up their customer service phone number, call that number, and then talk with a representative. If they said that they did have someone call you, then great, continue on with the conversation. Then if not, you know that you did not provide any personal information to the person that you thought might have been trying to scam you. Some tips to avoid scams. Number 1, never send money to someone you have never met face-to-face. 2, don't click on links or open attachments in unsolicited emails or text messages. 3, don't believe everything you see. Like I was just talking about with the scam brands and organizations. Scammers are great at mimicking official seals, fonts, and other details. And just because a website or email looks official does not mean that it is. Number 4, don't buy online unless a transaction is secure. 5, be extremely cautious when dealing with anyone you've met online. 6, never share personally identifiable information with someone who has contacted you unsolicited. 7, don't be pressured to act immediately. That business or that charity that's trying to reach you, asking for money or asking you to support them in any way, shape, or form, a true reputable company will still be there tomorrow, and they'll understand if you want to do a little bit of extra research. If they are trying to pressure you to act immediately, that's a huge red flag that they're just interested in receiving your money. Number 8, use secure, traceable transactions when making payments for goods, services, taxes, and debts. Number 9, whenever possible, work with businesses that have proper identification, licensing, and insurance. And number 10, be extra cautious about what you share on social media. So if you are on social media, pay attention that what you're sharing. Figure out if it's something that might be, for example, an answer to one of your security questions for your banking or any of your other personal websites. Is what you're sharing potentially going to give someone access to your money or anything you don't want them to have access to? So go through, make sure if you do have anything, maybe remove it, or just think twice before you participate in a fun social media trend down the line. I'm going to skip through these next few scams because I'm sure Tamara's going to talk about a lot of them. I do encourage you, if you are looking up a business, to do the same for charities. So if you're interested in donating to a charity, you can go to give.org and you can look up that charity, and we have charity reports on many of these nonprofit organizations. So you can see how much money is going to those who are employed by that charity and how much of it is actually going to the cause. And just as a reminder, you can go to bbb.org to look up the businesses and see what their reputation is and if they are trusting or not. What we do with all this information, if we see a large number of reports coming in about a business or a charity, or if we see a lot of complaints coming in, I should say, we connect with the FTC, the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the FBI, as well as local police, to inform them of the reports that we're receiving so we can hopefully find some way to stop that situation from happening. What are some ways that you can help? First, go to bbb.org or give.org to report your scam information and to research businesses and charities. You can report your scams and any fraud you may notice to our scam tracker. You can download our risk report at bbb.org/risk report to help find out what you are most at risk for and how to prevent yourself from falling for those scams. And then remember to share these tips and stories with your loved ones to hopefully prevent themselves from falling for a scam as well. If you would like any further information, this is our phone number for our office at Upstate New York, as well as my email. But as I mentioned, if you are from another part of our country, there's a BBB that represents pretty much every area of the United States. So feel free to go to bbb.org and look up that contact number, or feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you. And with that, I'm gonna throw it on over to Tamar.
Thanks, Lauren. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tamar Tait, and I'm a volunteer assistant attorney general in the Westchester Regional Office of the Attorney General, and it's good to be with you today. I work closely with Gary Brown, who's the statewide elder abuse coordinator for Attorney General Letitia James. And Gary and I co-host the Attorney General's Report, which is an hourly radio show that features a variety of matters involving scams and frauds. What I'm going to do at the outset of my presentation is walk you through the types of complaints that we've received during the pandemic, and then I'm going to go into some of the scams that we've seen, some of which Lauren already mentioned, some classic and some with twists. So at the outset of the pandemic, we received thousands and thousands of complaints about price gouging. You remember how hard it was to get toilet paper, paper towels, bleach, disinfecting wipes. They were really hard to find, and the problem was that both wholesalers and retailers were jacking up their prices, engaging in price gouging. So, as I said, we got thousands of complaints, and we issued hundreds of cease and desist orders to businesses to cut it out. For the most part, once they were put on notice, they did, and the number of price gouging complaints has decreased dramatically. We're still getting a trickle of complaints on disinfecting wipes for some reason in certain areas, but largely price gouging complaints have subsided. Another type of complaint that we've been receiving at the outset of the pandemic especially was what we called refund cancellation complaints. And this is if you booked a wedding and had to cancel or postpone, or if you had tickets for an event that had to cancel, something along those lines, and you're just trying to get your money back. So sometimes these businesses themselves are in a really difficult situation financially, and they can't make these full refunds. So what we're at the Attorney General's office doing is trying to broker some kind of compromise that works well for both sides. For example, there's a summer camp near me that had to close last summer, just for the summer. And what they did with the parents that paid the tuition was they gave you a credit for the following summer, which works out really well if you have a child that still wants to go to summer camp this summer. But if they've aged out, or if you've moved away, or any other reason that child wouldn't be interested in going back, this might not be the best solution for you. So we're trying to work out arrangements that work for both parties. If you have been a victim of any of these kind of refund cancellations, please reach out to us. We'll see what we can do. I will post our contact information in the chat box following the presentation. Another thing that we saw a lot of during the pandemic was fake cures and treatments for COVID-19. And the Attorney General likes to call these fake lotions and potions. The FTC sent hundreds of letters to companies that were trying to sell fake cures, treatments, and preventive therapies. Many of these were aimed at older Americans who felt more vulnerable to COVID. By now, these have trickled, but at the height of the pandemic, there were so many, and some of them were just completely bizarre. We had things from CBD oil, colloidal silver, traditional Chinese remedies, homeopathic and naturopathic treatments, We had intravenous vitamin C therapies and nasal sprays. There was something on Amazon, a company called Organolife that was selling mare's milk, which is milk from a horse. And they were claiming that this was a cure for COVID. And Amazon removed the product after the FTC contacted them. There was another product that the FTC took action against called Canadian Chaga. They were pitching chaga tea, chaga capsules, chaga tincture. They said this would be a cure for COVID-19. And for those of you that don't know what chaga is, it's actually a fungus that grows parasitically on hardwood trees. So there were some pretty bizarre treatments out there. And we were getting, I'd say every day we were learning about new bizarre treatments for COVID-19. But as I said, that's gone down to a trickle. And what we are probably seeing the most of right now, and this has been throughout the pandemic, has been fake unemployment claims. So imposters are filing claims for unemployment benefits using the names and personal information of people who obviously haven't filed claims. And then people learn about the fraud when they get a notice from their state unemployment benefits office or from their employer about their supposed application for benefits. So if this happens to you, it means that someone's misusing your personal information, including your social security number and your date of birth. And what you need to do is really act fast, because there are things you can do to protect your finances and your credit. So the first thing you need to do is report the fraud to your employer, and then you should be reporting the fraud to the Unemployment Benefits Agency. There's also a very helpful website. It's called identitytheft.gov, and that's where you can report the fraud to the FTC, and you can get help with the next important recovery steps there. Another suggestion is you should review your credit reports often. For the next year, you can check your reports every week through, and this is for free, through annualcreditreport.com, and that will help you spot any new fraud very quickly. And then a final word on unemployment fraud. The unemployment payments usually are deposited to accounts that the imposters control, but every once in a while, the payments will get sent to the real person's account. And if that happens to you, the imposters might reach out asking you to send the money to them. They might pretend to be the state unemployment agency and say the money was sent by mistake, so please send it back. This is a money mule scam, that's what that's called. And participating in this could open up a whole new can of worms for you. So the best thing to do, as I said, if you get benefits you never applied for, just report it directly to your state unemployment agency and ask for instructions from there. Don't respond to phone calls or texts or emails telling you to wire any money or send cash or put money on gift cards, because your state agency is never going to ask you to repay money that way. So as the vaccinations for COVID started to become more widely available this past year, we started to see a lot of vaccine-related scams. So for example, scammers were claiming that for a fee, they could sort of help you jump the line and get a vaccine that at that time was otherwise very hard to get. So now that the vaccines are so widely available, those have fallen by the wayside, but we have a new scam related to COVID vaccines now, and that's vaccine cards. And these are cards that say you've been vaccinated. If you've gotten a COVID vaccine, you know what I'm talking about. Everyone gets a card saying that you've been fully vaccinated. And what scammers are doing are selling fake cards, mostly online. And this is illegal. Actually, New York State passed legislation just last week making the sale of fake vaccination cards illegal with a penalty of up to 1 year in prison. So hopefully we will start seeing less of that. Another problematic thing we were seeing a lot of as people were getting vaccines was they were posting their vaccine cards, like doing selfies on social media like Facebook. And this was a really bad idea. I mean, we understand people were excited to get the vaccine, but the problem is your vaccine card contains personal information that scammers can use to steal your identity and commit fraud. So that's especially true if your privacy settings on your social media sites aren't strict, which means that your image, your card can be widely distributed. And the problem there is identity theft is like a puzzle. So it's made up of lots of different pieces of personal information, and you don't want to hand over to identity thieves the pieces they need to complete the picture. So many of the scams that get reported to our office involve older adults who are unfortunately particularly at risk for being targeted. It's very difficult to catch scammers because they literally could be anywhere in the world. And that's why the Attorney General's office has prioritized outreach campaigns that raise awareness of what these scams look like, especially through programs like this. We want to warn people so that they won't become victims in the first place. There was a study done in 2016 in New York State that put the amount lost to financial elder fraud in New York State at $1.5 billion a year. And that's a huge amount of money. But I actually think it's a low ball because it turns out that only 1 in 44 elderly financial victims ever actually report it. And there's a tremendous reluctance to admit. And some of the reasons that people don't come forward to report that they've been victimized are shame or denial. They might blame themselves, or if the abuser is a family member, there may be dependency or loyalty issues or fear of retaliation. My colleague, Gary Brown, tells a story about a woman who came up to him after he had done an elder abuse program. And she told him that she'd been a victim of the grandparent scandal, which I'll go into shortly. And she said she lost $3,000 to the scam. And she said it was the first time she had ever told anyone about it. And she actually gave Gary a hug. And he said, well, why didn't you tell your adult children or other family members? And she said, I was too embarrassed, and I would rather suffer the loss of the money in silence than risk losing my financial independence because my family members might think that I've lost it and want to put me in some kind of care home. And I just don't want to risk losing my financial independence. And so imagine, this is really a terrible thing because if your car is stolen or your house is burglarized, you would routinely call the police. But if you're victimized by one of these financial scams, you're really reluctant to tell people. And scammers, they follow the headlines and they operate by trying to trigger emotional responses in the victims. And often the victims aren't thinking clearly because they're so conflicted by a panic that the scammer might have created. And as a result, they're more easily manipulated. You know, greed, fear, love, goodwill, all of these emotions are used by scammers, and even sophisticated and experienced consumers can be vulnerable if the scammer pushes the right emotional buttons. You know, it's not about intelligence. It's really about having a panic situation or a situation where you've built trust in someone who is a scammer. For example, the biggest example I can think of is Bernie Madoff, who was the biggest con artist in the history of the United States. He stole about $60 billion. But if you look at his victims, you'll see that they weren't stupid or unsophisticated people. They were some of the smartest and individual and institutional investors in the country. So, you know, scammers really understand how to get their victims to do what they want. As I said, they push emotional buttons. In the Madoff case, it was a greed button. I mean, most people have some element of greed. Deep down, we all want to be grand prize winners, and we all want to pay the lowest price. We all want the best return on our investment, and scammers will always try to take advantage of that. Now, shifting into a different topic, robocalls. If you felt that the number of robocalls and scam calls that you received at the outset of the pandemic were, well, if you feel that they decreased, that's accurate, because we found that these calls went down by about 40% in the first few months of the pandemic, probably because the scammers themselves couldn't get to their call centers with all the lockdowns. However, the number of robocalls is increasing rapidly once again. And I'm going to spend a bit of time right now talking about how those robocall operations work and how you can avoid becoming a victim. So the anatomy of these calls is, first of all, there's going to be something to try to push your emotional buttons. The caller is going to try to seem very trustworthy and believable, and here's the big red flag. They're going to tell you there's an urgent deadline, and if you don't act immediately, either something really bad is going to happen or you're going to lose a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for something great to happen to you. So they try to set a deadline, but a legitimate offer that's made today is still going to be around tomorrow, so you need to keep that in mind. The most common phone scam in the history of our country has been the Irs Scam. This is where the caller says he's an agent of the IRS and that you owe money. And if you don't pay today, you'll be arrested. Sometimes he says, go buy gift cards, call back with the serial numbers of the cards. And when you think that scenario through, there's a lot of elements of this that just don't make sense. Does the IRS call you on the phone? No, they correspond by mail. Do they threaten you with same-day arrest if you don't pay? No, they don't. Do they tell you to pay your taxes by gift card? No, they don't. But if you don't know that this is a scam, you might actually be afraid that you're in trouble with the IRS. And I think deep down, many of us really are afraid of getting in trouble with the IRS. So the scam plays on those deep-seated fears. In recent years, this Irs scam has been replaced by the Social Security scam, which Lauren had mentioned. Either so many people had heard of the Irs scam or experienced an Irs scam call themselves that it was losing effectiveness. So now more often the person says he's with the Social Security Administration. He asks you to provide your Social Security number to confirm that you're the person he's trying to reach. And if you provide your number, he's going to use it to commit identity theft. He might also tell you that there's some kind of fee or fine that you owe, and if you don't pay, your benefits will be discontinued. So that's become far and away a much more common scam than the Irs scam. So the scam that gets me the angriest, I mentioned before, is the Grandparent Scam. And this typically works like this. A senior citizen gets an unexpected call from someone who says they're their grandchild. And the caller then falsely says there's an emergency. They ask the grandparent to send money right away. They might say something like, Grandma, I got arrested for drunk driving. I need bail money fast. Or the caller might claim to have been mugged. Or that their car has broken down, and the caller will often tell the grandparent not to call their parents because the parents will be mad or they'll worry too much. Sometimes the caller pretends to be an attorney or a bail bondsman or someone else in law enforcement, contacting the grandparent on their behalf of the grandchild. They often call in the middle of the night or early in the morning to take advantage of the fact that the victim might not be alert enough at that point to really ask more questions. The victims are then instructed that they have to mail cash payments or go out and buy a prepaid gift card or debit card, and to call back and read the serial numbers to them. During the pandemic, we actually saw a twist on this where the scammers were aware that older people weren't going out as much. So they were driving to the homes of the grandparents to pick up cash, because many people unfortunately have cash lying around their houses. So that was a frightening twist during the pandemic, where the scammers would actually confront the grandparents. While we warn grandparents not to fall for the grandparent scam, grandparents are often worried about how they can tell when a grandchild is really in trouble. And here's some tips to keep in mind. Take a pause. Scammers will try to create a sense of urgency, and they'll prey on victims' emotions and their love of family members. So take a pause and call other family members, call your grandchild maybe themselves. Another trick is sometimes people ask a question that only the real grandchild might know the answer to, like what was the name of your first pet? Something only they would know. Also, it could be helpful to develop a secret code or password with family members that can be used to verify the identity of the family members on the phone. So hopefully with those tips, grandparents will become more cautious when they receive what seems to be a very alarming call. We've also seen an uptick during the pandemic of what's called utility scams. And that's where the caller says they're calling from your utility company, that you're behind in your bill payments, and they're going to turn off your power unless you provide payment. And this kind of scam really took off during the pandemic because a lot of people did fall behind on their utility payments. If you get a call, what you should do from someone claiming to be from a utility company, thank them, and then pick up the phone and call your utility company directly. Don't try to do business over the phone with an individual who claims they're from your utility company. They could be, but then again, it could very well be that they're scammers. Even if the caller insists that you have a past due bill or your services will be cut off, never give your bank information over the phone unless you're the one that's placing that call to a number that you know is legitimate. And remember, utility companies don't demand banking information by email or by phone, and they won't force you to pay by phone as your only option. So Lauren had touched briefly on charity scams, which is something else we saw a lot of during the pandemic. And I only want to say, we want you to be generous, but we want you to be careful. There's one suggestion I'd like to make on this topic, and that's it's never a good idea to make a donation based on a phone call that you receive. The caller could well be a scammer who's trying to get you to donate to a sham charity, or even if the caller's a real telemarketer who may be acting on behalf of a legitimate charity. What you should know is, on average, that telemarketer is going to keep about 1/3 of the donation that you make. So the best way to make sure that your contribution goes directly to the charity is go to the website or send a check directly to them. Just be careful about how you donate. The tech support scam, which is the next scam I'd like to discuss, has become extremely common now that we're all home working on our computers. And this is where the caller says he's from Apple or Microsoft or some other tech company, and he says, you have a problem with your computer, and if you give me remote access, I will fix it for you. What happens is, if you do give remote access to your computer, they're going to put malware or ransomware on it, and then the only way you're going to be able to get him to remove it is to give your credit card information over the phone. So most phone scams in general work in about 1 in 50 calls. The tech support scam, it's incredibly efficient. It works in 1 in 6 calls. So it's not really clear what emotional buttons it's pushing. I think a lot of us are so dependent on our computers, but we're a little bit afraid of how they actually work. And if something goes wrong, we feel that we need tech support right away. And so we're all too ready to believe these tech support scammers when they do call. And they're taking advantage of that lack of familiarity of ourselves with how a computer works. And as we're home on our computers, a number of us, including many older adults, are falling victim to romance scams. Lauren had mentioned that as one of the primary scams this past year. And what happens in these romance scams is scammers will often set up fake profiles and on social media sites and on dating sites, and then they'll reach out to other people who have recently started putting up their own sites, profiles, and they start emailing, they start talking eventually on the phone, they build trust with the victim until eventually what they're doing is asking for money. And there's always a reason that the scammer can't meet in person, they've broken their leg, or they've got a business they can't leave, or something like that, but they really need the money. And too often, the victim will provide it. And what's really disturbing about romance scams is that, as with the grandparent scam, people don't usually report it. Because if someone calls our office with suspicions about a caller who maybe is perpetrating the IRS scam or the Social Security scam, they're relieved when they're told it's a scam. But if someone calls over suspicions about a person that they might have developed feelings for, and we tell them it's a scam, very often they just don't want to hear it. And they'll keep sending the money even after law enforcement officials have told them that it's a scam. So if you know someone who's going on to dating websites or social media, it's really important to warn them in advance because people are less likely to become victims if they know the warning signs. I mentioned in the context of several of these scams that scammers will often demand payment in the form of gift cards. These have become the method of choice because the money ends up being virtually untraceable. Providing the numbers from the back of a gift card is it's just like sending cash. Whether victims give the numbers over the phone or text a photo of the back of the card, they're essentially handing the money over to the scammers who then quickly drop the funds into foreign bank accounts. It's nearly impossible to get the money back because gift cards don't have the same protections as credit or debit cards. And in response to the increasing number of scams that have demanded payment by gift cards, the FTC has now made it illegal for any telemarketer to request payment by gift card, over the phone, or otherwise. Gift cards are to be used for gifts and not for payment of obligations. If someone's asking you to pay over the phone by gift card, it's a clear red flag. They're trying to scam you. So what are some of the phone tips that you can use to stay safe? Well, for starters, we encourage you to think of the phone as a one-way street. By that, we mean it's only safe to give out personal information if you made the call to a number that you know to be a legitimate number of your bank or your credit card company or to a government agency. If someone calls you, you can never really be sure if they are who they say they are. So, for example, if a caller calls you and says they're from American Express and he's calling about unauthorized charges on your credit card, you should hang up. Take out your credit card, call the 800 number on the back of the card, and now you can be 100% certain that you're talking with a real American Express representative. The guy who called you the first time, he might have been from American Express, or he might have been a scammer. There's really no way to be sure. In order to make a call more believable, many scammers are now using a technology called caller ID spoofing. So they can make your caller ID say whatever they want it to say. So if they want you to believe it's the IRS calling, they'll make your caller ID say IRS or Internal Revenue Service, or they might display the phone number of the real Internal Revenue Service in Washington, D.C. What we encourage you to do is use caller ID as a screening tool. And if you don't recognize the number, just don't answer it. Some people, when they don't recognize the number and they think they're getting a scam call, decide they want to engage the caller and play along just to waste the caller's time. And this isn't a great idea for two reasons. First of all, you're wasting your own time too, but more importantly, the computers that generate these calls, they can tell when it's a live voice picking up the phone. And if a live voice does answer, the program is designed to keep calling your number. And the scammer might also sell your number to another scammer. So the point is, the more of these calls that you answer, the more you're going to get. And the fewer that you answer, the fewer you're going to get. So please resist the temptation to do that. So some phone providers are now providing spam warnings where you'll see the words potential spam or something similar on your caller ID. That's telling you that the number that originated the call is not the same number being displayed. They're warning you that caller ID spoofing is being used. And the more and more of us are not picking up our phones if we don't recognize the number. And now scammers are using a technology called neighbor spoofing. So what they do is they'll spoof a number in your area code and exchange, and they'll just add 4 other digits to the end. And they're hoping that you think it's a neighbor or a friend and that you'll answer the phone on that basis. Well, don't fall for it. Just don't answer the phone at all if you don't recognize the number in its entirety. Sometimes they'll actually spoof your own number, which is a little bizarre and confusing. But you should know that it's impossible to call your own number. There's also call blocking apps out there. I'm just going to mention a couple of names, but there's many more. Nomo Robo, Robo Killer. These companies for a small fee will intercept your calls, and if they can identify it as spam, you'll just hear one ring and then nothing further. It'll hang up. So I just try not to answer the phone if I don't recognize the number, but that's another option out there. Sometimes people will ask us about the Do Not Call Registry, donotcall.gov. I'm signed up, but I still get a million spam calls. And whether you should sign up for it, the answer is yes and no. It's worth it because legitimate telemarketing companies in the United States won't call you if you're on it. Unfortunately, the spammers could be anywhere in the world using caller ID spoofing, and they're not deterred by your being on that list, because even if you report the number you saw to the FTC, it's not really the number that originated the call. So it's not a perfect solution. Lauren had mentioned phishing emails, where you get an unsolicited email asking you to click on a link. She covered it. I just want to reiterate, don't do it. They're going to ask you to confirm that you're the person they were trying to reach, and you're going to be putting yourself at risk for identity theft. So don't click on anything that comes to you. Just go to your browser box and log on to the legitimate website of the company, or get the phone number and contact them directly. As more and more older adults are using the internet, one of the dangers is weak passwords. A lot of us worry about forgetting our passwords, so we use a family member's name or birth dates or the street we live on or something else that's familiar. Those are very weak passwords. And the reason they're weak is because spammers can easily Google the answers. They can figure out what your password might be from information that's readily available on the internet. An ideal password is long. It has letters, it has punctuation symbols, it has numbers. You should try to make it as complicated as you can possibly make it, and it's okay to write it down somewhere that you think is safe. The other vulnerability I want to mention is your security question. When you open an account, you're usually asked to set up a security question in case you forget your password. And then when you answer the security question, you can then reset your password. And then at that point, you get access to your account. What scammers are now doing when they get your username but don't know your password is they'll enter some gibberish for the security question, for the password, and then the security question will pop up. And at that point, they're hoping that it's something they can search about you online to get the answer for. So, for example, your city of birth or your mother's maiden name, those are weak security question answers because they're answerable online. You want to pick another question like, who was your favorite athlete when you were a child? Or what was the make of your first car? Basically something that can't easily be Googled about you. And the last thing I want to mention is about online shopping. Please just always pay by credit cards. Don't use your debit card. If you pay by credit card and the product doesn't arrive, you can always dispute the charges with your credit card company. They're not going to make you pay. Even if you paid, but you can demonstrate that you still didn't receive the product, they'll pay you back. But when you pay by debit card, the money is immediately removed from your account and it's gone. If it turns out later that you didn't get what you paid for, you're going to be in a much worse position trying to get a bank to give you your money back rather than disputing the charge in the first place. So that's it, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And if you need to reach out to our Attorney General's office in New York State, our website is ag.ny.gov. And our helpline is 1-800-771-7755. And I will put that in the chat box too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamar, and thank you, Lauren, so much for sharing this. I think it's so helpful to humanize, being a scamming victim, so that way more people feel comfortable to talk about the experiences that they went through, and then also be able to learn about the different steps of preventing it. So I really appreciate both of you guys being here with all of us to go through all of these different examples of ways. I'm certainly learning stuff too and taking, notes down for my family that I'm gonna go home and be like, okay, we need a security code now for our family in case someone tries that scheme. So I do have someone who I can do a quick question, and you kind of both talked about this, but someone asked about, I got a call that Medicare is going to send out a new card because they're going to put a part about the vaccine on the Medicare card for the person. So obviously this question I would assume would be a scam. And have you guys heard anybody coming out with that at this time?
I have not. Have you, Lauren? That's a new one for me.
Okay.
Not that I can recall.
Okay. So at this point, I would assume that that's a scam. So this person, who asked the question, you should be looking to, check in with that and report it. Most likely that's not happening.
Kara, just so you know, one of the new scams that's out with Medicare fraud is the new COVID black and white Medicare card, and it is a scam. So definitely they should, if they gave out their Medicare information, they should contact the SMP program to report that.
Thank you, Beth. I do have someone who asked, do you have any recommendations for someone who is caring for their parent with dementia when it comes to preventing a lot of the internet scams?
That's really hard. The Attorney General's office has a publication that has a lot of useful information. If you I don't know what state this is coming from. I know in New York State, you can always reach out to the New York State Attorney General's office. We have a publication specifically dealing with how to keep senior citizens safe. So you can go to our website, ag.ny.gov, and we have a list of publications there, and that will be there. Or you can just call our number, which I posted into the chat.
Great, and I can always look into that and see about getting some copies of those as well on hand. And then I just have one more person with a question who has asked about how can I communicate with banks during this time if I'm POA for my mother and I don't want her to be scammed? Is there a certain list or I guess information they need to be bringing to the bank if they feel like there's a scam, so forth? Does that make sense?
If this is an isolated bank question and they're dealing with one bank in particular, I would suggest developing a relationship with the bank where they're aware that the parent is older and might not be capable of making personal financial decisions without support, and asking them what kind of, there might be documentation personal for them in that state, because I can only speak for New York State, that the bank might be able to give them where a trusted relative, child, other adult relative can act on behalf of that senior citizen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing to look into if that's someone that impacts your caring for someone. And then lastly, someone actually asked, could you type in the chat the 2 websites you mentioned for the robocalls? They want to share it with their family.
Of course.
I think that's also a helpful option for many people, of course, as it's popping up, and just being safe as much as possible. And then I do have one more question. Someone said, and I'll wrap it up with this last one. They asked, have you heard any scams in relation to people passing away from COVID, if family members have received a medical bill or funeral expenses? I don't think this person has had it happen to them, but they're just asking about if there's been any relevance with that.
I have not heard anything. Have you, Lauren?
No, I was trying to think of if I have, and nothing comes to mind in relation to that, but I can do a quick look on our scam tracker. I'm also going to share.
Oh, wait, I think you went mute for a second, Lauren. Hold on, there we go.
Thank you. I think I just went to hit enter. I probably muted myself during that. I apologize, but I just shared an article in the chat too that has some tips on signs of abuse and whatnot for World Elder Abuse Day, because I just realized that's tomorrow. So I shared that link there too, but that also includes some more links to helpful websites and information. But I'll look on our scam tracker to see if that's popped up at all, but that doesn't come to mind, at least in our area.
Okay, that's good to know. And what I can do is also, after today, I can also send the links that you've shared and put it in the email to everyone, so that way they're able to receive, if they're having issues with the chat or anything, they'll be able to click on the link from you guys. So at this time, the only other things I'm getting from everyone is thank you so much. Can we have, your guys' information, which we did. You guys shared your information to get in contact with earlier. Thank you for the information that I'm going to be sharing with my family. So I just want to extend that same gratitude. This is something that's very important as we're trying to protect ourselves as well as other people that we may know, to just take that second, to be cautious. And really grateful that Lauren, Tamar, and Beth, you were all able to join us here today for this exciting event. So thank you so much for taking out some time with us all to provide this educational opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
great being here.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hit the X button, and then I'll be able to send everybody the links that Tamar and Lauren put in the chat to you all, okay? So everyone take care and have a great day. And thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.